Alright, let's keep this brief. These videos are getting way too long. Come on, chop chop. And we're back. But seriously, I'm sick of editing these 18-minute videos, and judging by my recent metrics, you're sick of watching them. So I'm making an effort to rein myself back into a reasonable video length. I spent the last few weeks hammering away at my combat systems, being sick and hammering away some more, so let's take a look at what's new. As you've probably seen me point to in a few background edits, a big thing that was missing from my combat and every other part of the game is feedback. Feedback is one of the 5 core mechanics of gameplay, alongside rules, goals, challenges, and boundaries, and is responsible for a big portion of the feel of a game. Feedback is crucial to informing the player of the effects of their actions in-game, and comes in many forms, be it visual, auditory, or even physical, through controller rumble or haptics. Feedback kind of exists to uplift and translate the other systems, and in our case, we have very little. Currently all we have is a very placeholder health bar for our enemy's health, and we have a player one which isn't even actually hooked up, and some attack animations, but that's about it. And that's why our combat feels inconsequential and floaty and just bad in general. So how can we try to improve this? That's right, if you aren't familiar, hit stops are an age-old effect used to add some oomph to combat, especially melee combat. The idea is quite simple. As an attack lands on either the player or an enemy, instead of just continuing in the same way we would if it was a miss, we pause time for a split second, for just a frame or two, before continuing. This gives us a kind of impact moment where our brains can register the hit. This is usually where you'd see some kind of other visual effects as well, like another effect like flashing or some UI elements. But for now, I'm just implementing the basic idea. The good part about this effect is it's actually really simple. The main consideration is just whether we want to pause time entirely or just pause the player and the enemy that we're hitting. There's a case to be made for either. It's easy enough to stop what the player is doing, but since our monster is made up of several layers of independently moving and thinking parts, it was all a bit too annoying for me to cleanly pause all those different systems. So we're stopping time instead. I wrote a system which takes a few parameters like hit stop duration and intensity and had it trigger whenever the player or an enemy takes a hit. Then to give it a little more oomph, I also added a very slight camera shake which adjusts to the strength of the attack. Bigger attack, more shake. And yes, don't worry, there will be an option to turn off the camera shake. That's pretty nice. I can also adjust the duration of the hit stop based on the strength of the hit and really try to dial it in, but for now, I mean, it feels okay. Now, wouldn't it be nice if our animations also reacted to landing a hit versus missing one? Just quickly, this is the first in a series of announced videos in a schedule which I've uploaded to the Patreon. You don't need to be a paid member to see it, you just jump in. But if you feel a desire to contribute to me or my work, I'd be very grateful. There's a link below in the description. This video was really only made possible by the people who are already contributing, so thank you so much. Alright, back to it. Okay, so there's this behind the scenes clip from the making of the 2018 God of War, and in it they mention how they made their combat feel impactful. And one really good point they made is that even though they had hit stops, they didn't like that the attack animation still played out the same way regardless.
You can see that it doesn't go like this, right? It goes and then stops and then kind of glances off, the body goes, and then they kind of swipe back through.
So they came up with this idea of adding an IK rig to the arm, which is activated only when an attack lands, and it sticks the weapon in place.
Every time you'd hit a point of detection, the IK would take over on the arm and the upper body, so that you'd actually have a legitimate stopping point, but it would detect where it needed to be and hold it there.
The rest of the attack animation would carry out, but the weapon and arm would stay in place, creating this nice sense of impact. The weapon is literally stuck in the enemy for a few frames, and combined with the traditional hit stop and all the other bells and whistles, it makes for a really tight melee experience. So, I did that. For legal purposes, this is not the same system, please for the love of God, leave me alone. Again, this is pretty straightforward. I already had a rig set up on the player, so I just had to determine the closest point of impact when we hit the monster, snap the arm IK to emit animation, and then weave the duration into the hit stop system, so the IK persists for a few frames after everything returns to normal. I think because of the basic ass nature of my animations and the style of camera that we're using, maybe this doesn't have as much of an impact as I was hoping, but it's definitely something. Sound. Who doesn't like sound? Well, me lately. Now, I'm no sound designer, but even with me just blindly slapping in some sounds, it makes a huge difference. I genuinely don't understand people who can mute games while they're playing. That's insanity to me. If you've seen any of my streams or work before, you probably know that I like to keep an all-seeing, all-knowing audio manager in my scene, which stores all kinds of different audio clips. It's a singleton, so when I want to play a sound, I just call one of the many functions from it and pass in an audio clip from one of the lists. Often I'll have randomizable lists of different kinds of audio clips so that I can just get a random sound, hit sound, weapon sound, whatever, and play that. So that's what I did. I have set sounds for different actions like swinging the sword and a bunch of different ones for hits and gore, thanks to some sound packs that I picked up. So when I hit the enemy, I trigger it to play a few different ones at the same time, so we get a sort of layered sound thing happening. One other thing to keep in mind, when players hear the exact same sound over and over again, it becomes very frustrating very quickly. So when you're working with limited sound variety, and even when you're not, it's a good idea to randomize the pitch of the sound slightly before playing it to break the monotony. This is really powerful. You can really stretch a handful of tracks a lot further than you think you could by doing this. Now, we put this together with the hit stops, and we're getting somewhere. Next, I wanted to add some kind of hit react animation to the monster. I think it's fine if massive monsters don't flinch when you attack them, but smaller ones like this definitely should, so...
Perfection.
That's right, it's finally time to take damage. This has been on my to-do list since the end of 2023. Finally, the player can take damage and be shown that they're taking damage. There's a few layers to this. First, we have the health bar, which we already had, but it didn't do anything. So I hooked it up to the player stats and added a little pulse effect for when our health goes down. Cute. Next, I wanted to add some kind of vignette for when we get hit and have that pulse in from around the screen, but I wanted one that could change based on what just happened. So if we get hit directly, I wanted it to flash red and really intensely, but if we parry an attack, say, or block with a shield, it flashes a different color and maybe not as intense, to help show the player that they've received less damage. For this, I created a system which takes in a hit type scriptable object, which contains data like the desired vignette color, how much of a damage reduction that hit gives us, and how far it pushes the player. It also holds a list of sound clips that can be played randomly if a particular hit type is triggered. So when the player receives an attack of some kind, whether it goes through or not, the system looks at what else is happening. Did it hit the sword? Did it hit the shield? Did it hit us at all? What's happening? And pulls data from the appropriate hit type. For the sounds of actually getting hit, I wasn't too sure what to do, but I layered a few weapon, gore, and voice lines together in FL Studio to give us a kind of randomized sound. And yeah, it turned out pretty good. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's not good. It's fine. It's whatever. Yeah, it's fine. After the last video, I had people asking why the monster wasn't doing anything apart from swiping with the limbs. I mentioned I wanted to have specific limbs add specific special attacks to the system, so what I did is I put together a special attack system which handles exactly that. The limb controllers now take a scriptable object which contains different attacks, and those attacks are made up of phase data, like different phases of the attack itself, so movement, attacking, waiting, that sort of thing, as well as different animation triggers. So when a special attack is triggered, the system then sorts through what's available and runs the different attack phases. And these can be put together in different combinations in Editor, so I can just make different attacks and see what they do. For this, I did put together a generic animation clip as an example of a bite, which is basically just moving the body up and down, which I could have done through IK, I could have done through code, but I thought this would be simpler, and it should still translate nicely to different kinds of monsters and configurations. Every quadruped or biped should have a body, so I think it should be fine. But most likely there'll be some manipulation of IK handles as well, eventually. Slap in a chance to run a special attack instead of a normal one, and there we have it. So this is a bit of a late addition, but I wanted some blood, naturally. I imported a blood VFX pack and was trying to use that, but honestly it was getting a bit complicated with the decal projections and the fluid sims and everything, and it didn't seem to fit. I just wanted something nice and simple that would match with the low poly aesthetic. So I took a page from my own book, but the Book of Haunt and Seek, check out the mini devlogs for those over here, and quickly threw together a voxel blood particle effect using lots of little cubes. So we can give these little cubes physics and different dampening properties, and honestly, I like how it looks. I think it translates well. It's easy to add different materials also, so that we can differentiate the player blood from the monster blood. So now when an attack lands, we spawn some blood and add velocity in the direction of the attack. It's so dumb, but I love it. This part breaks my heart. I really tried to get mobs in for this video. I did. I even started the system on stream the other day. We've got the Plarians, I got their adorable little weapons, I created a state machine to recreate the Plarians' movement logic and everything, and I just ran out of time. I'll be doing some more NPC stuff in the future videos when I look at interaction systems and that sort of stuff, so I'll be adding the mobs in then at some point. It was a bit out of scope for this update anyway, considering it would use basically the same systems, but I just wanted them so bad. I mean, look at him.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Well, that's about it for part 2. I'm really happy with how the combat's feeling. Like any major system, there's so much more to come. There's a lot more to do and a lot of things to dial in, but they'll be added in other videos. For now, this is basically everything I wanted to cover for this rework, and if you compare it to where it was a couple of months ago, this is much better, so that's all that matters. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little two-parter and how the fights are looking now, and I'm looking forward to seeing the system expanded into different combat scenarios, getting some mobs in and doing all that sort of stuff. Different monsters as well. As always, thank you so much to my Patreon supporters. You genuinely make all this possible. So if you like what I do, jump on Patreon, show some love. I'll be back with some mini devlogs and other content soon, but until then, be good, and I'll see you in the next one.